How is it that some people are so willing to give up their rights? I'm talking specifically about the Second Amendment. A lot of people who are willing to give up their Second Amendment right are the same people who are willing to give up other rights. And not only are they willing to give up their own rights, they fight to make you give up your rights as well.
Our right, your hand! Our right, your hand! Our right, your hand! What do we want? Gun control! When do we want it? Now!
Thoughts and prayers are not enough. The Senate needs to step it up.
You see, people who give up their rights in exchange for government control really do believe that a structured, controlled environment loaded with laws, rules, and restrictions will be safer for everyone. They want to feel safe, and they believe their government will provide that safety. It's a mindset that runs rampant on the left, and it's encouraged by the cultivation of a victim mindset. This type of ideology appeals to those who don't want to take responsibility for their own lives or their own actions. They've been taught to believe that it's always someone else's fault. Government, parents, their professors, their boss. What's really disturbing is that some don't even take responsibility for their own emotions. They create safe spaces to shield them from opposing ideas. Now, on the other side of the political spectrum, you have conservative-minded people who say, get the hell out of my way. I'll do what I want, when I want, and I don't need anyone telling me what to think. The difference between the left and the right is those on the left want a government-controlled environment, and those on the right want freedom. Now, people on the left don't necessarily want to control you as much as they want to be controlled, but they can't achieve that unless you're on board. I mean, how could they have their government-controlled utopia if you're running around with your freedom and guns to protect that freedom? When you don't want to get on board, they try to implement legislation that forces you to play by their rules. I know it doesn't make sense to logical thinking people that some would put their lives in the hands of government and give up such an important thing as the right to bear arms, especially given the countless times we've seen that play out horribly for people in other countries. So how do people fall for this? Well, first off, they're taught that government is looking out for their best interest. Now, in order for them to believe that, they're told that there's an enemy that government and its laws will protect them against. You, the flag-waving, gun-owning, God-loving capitalist conservative, are positioned as the enemy. When it comes to gun laws, the most powerful strategy that's used against these people is their own fear and hate, the two strongest human emotions, by the way. You see, the anti-gunners that live among us are taught to fear guns and hate gun owners. Anti-gunners believe that guns cause people to do bad things. This is a reflection of their own inability to acknowledge free will. In other words, many of them think that the reason the killer kills is because he had a gun or because he had access to a gun. It implies that had the killer not been able to get a gun, he wouldn't kill. You can thank Hollywood for this. The left has done a fantastic job of making people victims of circumstance. It's a way of taking responsibility away from the person and placing it on the inanimate object, in this case, a gun. The strategy works perfectly on a certain type of person. It's a perfect strategy to use on those of the victim mentality, and there are plenty of them out there. They're usually the same ones who will choose not to take responsibility for a child they create, and often the same ones who want to take money from people who produce valuable products and services and give that money to those who produce nothing.
Senator Bernie Sanders wants to dramatically reverse recent downward trend of estate taxes, imposing a massive 77% top rate on the richest Americans.
In their world, somehow victimhood trumps personal responsibility. Victimhood is taught to be something to be proud of, a badge of honor, a statement of social justice. Now, how about hate? Have you noticed how much gun owners are hated? How about all the anger aimed at the NRA? The radical gun-grabbing politicians are always coming up with new and creative ways to turn you, the gun owner, into the enemy. You've heard them say, the blood is on your hands.
And there's blood on the hands of people just like you,
have rules
and
that would
shame on all these
actually make a
Republicans
difference.
who have blood on their hands.
The way the left positions law-abiding gun owners as the enemy is the most sinister part of it all. But the truth is, they're the enemy. They're the enemy of freedom. They're the enemy of American values. They're the ones disarming the good guys and giving sanctuary to killers. Now, how does that make any sense? It doesn't. Unless you've been conditioned from many different angles to see criminals as victims and successful, responsible people as cruel and selfish. Not only are these people conditioned, they're leveraged to stay in line. The media, Hollywood, our schools, and now social media are the breeding ground where they're conditioned, and the social pressure is the leverage. Don't for a minute think that these anti-gunners can easily change course on the anti-gun narrative without heavy backlash from their family and friends. They are locked in. So are the anti-gun politicians they voted for. And they don't want to lose their seat at the popular table because their peers and political positioning gives them their credibility. Without it, they're nothing. So we gun owners are not fighting about statistics and laws and facts. We're fighting against an ideology that's fueled by fear and hate, and people that will do anything to make us speechless and powerless. The most important component of being brainwashed is believing that you could never be brainwashed. This is why it's so difficult to talk sense into these people. Now, I know what the anti-gunners are saying. This is preposterous. We need stronger gun laws to save lives. These are the people who need to believe that they are the good guys fighting for justice against gun owners who are recklessly and intentionally putting everyone in danger. The answer to their gun laws is no. We've had full access to firearms since the day our country was formed. It's the one thing we have that keeps us safe and reminds our government who they work for. The problem is our psychology. No such thing as gun violence. The problem we face is human violence. But working on human violence doesn't help the gun grabbers. As a matter of fact, it shines a spotlight on their failed policies. Gang violence, rampant drug use, foreign terrorists, open borders, welfare dependency, violent politically motivated groups, gun-free zones, and sanctuary cities. So when we say there's no such thing as gun violence, only human violence, they don't even acknowledge it. Instead, they convince people who can't critically think that the problem is guns. On what planet does it make sense to bus hundreds of children into a building, take away all armed security, and then post a sign announcing that everyone inside is unarmed? Democrats like their gun-free zones because it's a political win for them and the perfect atmosphere to cultivate their gun violence narrative.
And as awful as that was, I thought it was an opportunity for us to finally do something about gun violence. You didn't hear one single word from the president about gun violence. The first historic hearing in 8 years on reducing gun violence. So
unchecked and unfettered gun violence.
And for us to be able to shift how we think about the issue of gun violence collectively.
We know this because every time a killing occurs in a gun-free zone, the gun grabbers ignore the real cause of violence and use the tragedy to push for more gun regulations. Well, gun owners have had enough. We'll no longer accept the fake narrative. We'll no longer compromise our gun rights, and we sure as hell won't put our families in danger by leaving them unarmed and helpless in a country where the left sets violent killers loose in the streets of our communities. We're demanding more, much more from our elected employees, and we won't tolerate their incessant need to put good people in danger by giving the bad guys the upper hand and by creating irrational gun fear and voter dependency. The Second Amendment is not a privilege, it's your right. And now we need to defend it.